So happy Earth Day, everybody, by the way.
Hey, happy Earth Day. And I'm going to introduce you now, Vicki, to our attendees who are joining us. Thanks everyone for coming today to one in a series of events to celebrate Earth Week. Today is Earth Day. And in celebration of that, we have our own Mary Ellen Lemay to do a presentation on the Pollinator Pathway. We did one live before COVID last February at the library, and we had a great turnout. But this year is so different. Everything is virtual. And before we launch into Mary Ellen's fantastic presentation, I'd like to introduce to you Vicki Tesoro, our first selectman.
Good afternoon, everybody. So happy to be here. I want to thank our Sustainability Committee for all that they're doing and say Happy Earth Week to everyone. Today is the actual day, April 22nd. It's a beautiful day, a little chilly out there, but nonetheless, with all the beautiful trees, and I think Trumbull is such a beautiful place to be during the spring, and this spring has not disappointed any of us, so you have a chance to get outside and enjoy the day and partake of all the wonderful activities that the Sustainable Committee is doing this week for Earth Week. And I'm here because this is about pollinator pathways, and I am happy to be able to proclaim Trumbull as a pollinator pathway community. And here's the proclamation. Can't really see it because my my background is not letting me share it with you. But so the town council actually proclaimed this back on April 5th on our last meeting. And if I could, I'll just read parts of it if that's okay with you, Mary Ellen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So whereas native bees and other pollinators are a crucial, oh, look at that, that's great. A crucial component of a healthy ecosystem and a vital link in our food system, providing the pollination responsible for over 3/4 of the world's plant species and for 1 out of every 3 bites of food that we eat. And whereas pollinator populations are in sharp decline, and research has shown that many pesticides, including fungicides and herbicides, can pose risks to already compromised bees and other pollinators. And I won't go on and read all the whereases here. I'm going to skip down to where it says, whereas every resident of Trumbull can make a difference by planting native milkweed and nectar plants to provide habitat and forage for the monarch and pollinators in locations where people live, work, learn, play, and worship. So now, therefore, be it resolved by Town Council resolution that the town of Trumbull is hereby declared a pollinator-friendly community and encourages and supports pollinator health, and it urges community members to adopt pollinator-friendly practices. So now, therefore, I, Vicki A. Tesoro, First Selectman of the town of Trumbull, am honored to have joined other leaders, town leaders across Fairfield County and the country, and do hereby recognize Trumbull as a town on the Pollinator Pathway. And I call upon the Trumbull community to join me in celebrating the significance of pollinators on this day. So here we go. Thank you very much. Appreciate, as I said, all that you are doing. I hope everybody enjoys today's program.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. That was great.
My pleasure.
Thank you. All right, without further ado, Mary Ellen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. I am delighted to be here, especially on Earth Day. And again, like Pam said, one of many days of Earth Week celebration here in Trumbull, thanks to the Sustainable Trumbull team, which is just an awesome group of folks. And so I'm going to share my screen here, and hopefully we can my presentation. So is it, everybody can see that? It's a sign. It says this is a site on the Trumbull Pollinator Pathway. Can you see it? Okay, good. So this is actually some new signs that were just made up, and with Vicki's blessing, I would love to put one of these at Town Hall in that little circular garden that's in the little courtyard there, because just to get people to become familiar with this whole Pollinator Pathway initiative, and also to see what the logo looks like. So we had these signs. They look like actually like political signs, that size. We didn't make too many of them, but we want to highlight some of the important sites in our town that have native plants that are pesticide free. So I will start my presentation. And my major focus is, how pollinators are helping to connect the land, landowners, and communities. So actually, for the past 4 years, I have been launching pollinator pathways in towns throughout Connecticut. We started our first one in the town of Wilton in 2017, and now we are a multi-state initiative. And as Pam said, we tried to launch our pollinator pathway here in Trumbull in February of last year, and we had over 70 people show up in the library for that lecture, and I was so delighted to see the interest. But COVID happened, and it was much worse than we anticipated. And so we put the launch on the shelf for about a year. But something positive that came out of being sequestered at home was that people kind of refocused on their yards and began to watch what showed up in their backyards in a way that they never have before. For example, my office is now in the front of my dining room. I look out to the front of the house, and I never knew that I had a red fox that came by the front of my house every day at 7:30. She would go into the backyard, and then at the end of the day, she would take off around 5 o'clock, go back out to the street. So she must have had a job in my yard, but I would have never noticed that unless I was at home during this last year. And so the same holds true for the pollinator pathway. People are noticing when they plant certain things that pollinators show up. So just to clarify for everybody, the pathway is an idea. It's shared among existing conservation organizations. It's really a network. And so it's not a nonprofit. We don't hold money. We're not a 501c3. It's just a network. And we never anticipated that this would grow the way it did since 2017. We have a steering committee of people from several town pathways where we manage a fabulous website, which I'll talk to you about. We share educational materials. We connect interested towns and how to join. And we give presentations like the one that I'm doing for you today. But really the beauty of the pollinator pathway is that it is managed at the town level by the existing organizations. So here in Trumbull, we already have grassroots teams here that would maybe have been doing this or would be interested in doing this and willing to organize plantings and talks and outreach and offer home visits. And so every town adds its own flavor to its pollinator pathway. And that's really why this has worked so beautifully. In 2019, Connecticut Magazine did an article on the pollinator pathway, and it was pretty exciting to make it big in Connecticut Magazine. And actually our article was in the centerfold. So at age 58, I was in the centerfold of Connecticut Magazine, finally, with my other partners here. So these are the 4 of us that started the pollinator pathway in Connecticut. Louise Washer is the executive director of the Norwalk River Watershed Association. Donna Merrill is the executive director of the Wilton Conservation Commission. Wilton Land Trust. She was the one who started the concept of the pollinator pathway and came up with the name. And then there's me, and there's Kim Stoner, who is our state entomologist. Kim is our queen bee. She's based in New Haven, and she knows more about bees than I could ever imagine. So the pollinator pathway towns started again with one in the town of Wilton in 2017. And then through the efforts that I'll share with you kind of what the messaging was, it spread to Ridgefield. It spread all the way down the Norwalk River watershed. And then it began to spread to other towns. And here's Trumbull over here. And, you'd never know that I was from Trumbull because I just never got to do in my own town. And now all of these, we are joining forces with all these other towns in Connecticut and across the border in New York that have designated, just like Vicki did today, that their towns are on the pollinator pathway. And as a town, they're going to take efforts to increase the health of our landscape for pollinators. So this is where we are now. Actually, the most recent count is 237 towns in states all over the Northeast. We go all the way up to Southern Maine and then down to Maryland. And thousands of individuals have joined since 2017. And I came across this, little mini poem of Pearl of Wisdom that says, "We cannot hold a torch to light another's path without brightening our own." And that's how this really has grown, because every town holds a torch to begin their own pollinator pathway, but then they're lighting other people's paths in Shelton and Monroe, and every town adjacent begins to light up on the map. Before you know it, we have pretty much the whole state of Connecticut working on the pollinator pathway. So the reason why the Pollinator Pathway project has worked is because, number one, it really has the power of a charismatic character. Could be a butterfly, could be a honeybee, could be hopefully our native bees, because our focus is really more on the native bees than the honeybees. Honeybees are actually not native. They were brought over from Europe a few hundred years ago, but our honeybees, our native bees are much better pollinators than honeybees. So we should be focusing on our native bees and our native bumblebees, because they are really the powerhouses for pollination. And because those are creatures that are charismatic and they show up. So if you start planting native plants, they will start showing up like within hours. It's quite amazing. So we have a charismatic butterfly. It's a positive message that's framed around local actions. It's not doom and gloom. We're not talking about extinction and climate change, even though those are critical things that are driving the problems with the pollinators. We are taking the positive step of giving people action steps that they can make a real difference. It's important because our messaging, which I'll share with you, is extremely simple. It's local control. It's Trumbull Pollinator Pathway. It's Westport Pollinator Pathway. It's a decentralized. And people really need an excuse to reach across boundaries and talk. Now, of course, this slide was made before COVID. So we really even need more excuses now to begin as things start opening up, hopefully, within our town and across town lines and across state lines, to talk to each other about something positive and work on something that can make a difference. So we're offering a way to take action at home in your backyard, an action step that works and that is easy, and join a wave of others who are also taking action in your neighborhood, in the next neighborhood, in the next town. And as I mentioned before, if you plant it, they will come. If you go to White Birch Nursery and look at all the native plants he has there, when they're in bloom, the bees are all over them. You shake the bees off, you put the plant in your car, you bring the plant to your backyard, and within a half hour or an hour, the bees will find your plant. They won't go to the non-native plants. They'll look for that native plant and they'll show up. So if you plant it, they will come, and it is certainly instant gratification. So when we were developing the pollinator pathway, we tapped into what the anxiety was that was already there. People were anxious about the sharp decline in bees and birds and butterflies. The New York Times had this article, which so many people read, The Insect Apocalypse. Insect populations are down dramatically. In the United States, down 49%, across into Europe and globally down 75%. It's absolutely insane. You remember when we used to drive our cars and we'd have bugs smushed on our windshields. You just don't see that anymore. And it's not because the windshields are made of Teflon, it's because the bugs are not there. The insects are not there. So people were very anxious about this. And when you start talking about apocalypse and extinction, people put their hands on their ears and say, there's nothing I can do about this. I'm upset about it, but I don't know what to do because the scale is so massive. Well, we're here to tell you that, yes, there is something that you can do. You know, we have, when we do our presentations, we talk about the monarch populations that are down 90%. You know, talk about a charismatic character. You're not seeing monarchs anymore. The North American bumblebees are in decline at 96%. European bumblebees are down. And this is the study in Germany that over 20 years, they looked at all flying insects, down 76%. I mean, it's just insane. The reasons for it, of course, are increased pesticide use, climate change, because flowers are blooming out of sequence with when the bees show up because of the change in the climate. And number 3, people don't plant as many native plants anymore. And the native insects that we have here are genetically linked over thousands of years with our native plants. And if we separate our native plants from our native insects, we have broken that link and the populations begin to decline. So the idea is if you put the native plants back, the native insects will have the food that they need, and then the whole food chain will begin to heal all the way up. So when we talk about pathways, I want you to kind of visualize corridors. So large corridors that are connected across our landscape. So here's Connecticut. We have wildlife and recreational pathways. If you go up north into Connecticut, the Litchfield Hills, the Hudson Highlands comes into central Fairfield. Farther north is, of course, the Appalachian Trail. These are areas that are more wooded, more resilient, less people live there. And so those are the resilient landscapes that in the face of climate change, we want to create connections to, so that species can move north across the landscape to those resilient lands. We also have an Atlantic flyway. Migrating birds go across our coast, and Trumbull's right under that arrow. We have the birds that are migrating right now and over the year in both directions. And then our healthy watersheds, the Housatonic watershed, which is the big one. We are in the Pequannock watershed, which is, and then there's the Saugatuck, the coastal watersheds. There's multiple watersheds. Everyone lives in a watershed. But why that's important is because when you live in a watershed, the water from all of our neighborhoods and all of our developments goes into those rivers and ends up in the Long Island Sound. So what we do in our backyards that feed into our water systems has an impact on species of plants and animals all through Connecticut and into the Long Island Sound. So a pollinator pathway is a corridor of public and private properties that provide native plant habitat and nutrition for pollinators. So the big green circles are, let's say, Old Mine Park, the Pequannock River Trail, maybe Twin Brooks, and these are the neighborhoods that are in between. So if you were a pessimist, you'd look at that and say, well, these were all green at one point, and now we fragmented the landscape with our neighborhoods. Well, that's not going to change because we live there. So what's the solution? The solution is to change how we treat our backyards, make our landscapes stepping stones between these resilient landscapes. So there's a free flow across the landscape. So if we begin to look at a corridor, our neighborhoods are in that corridor, and one by one, as we join the pollinator pathway, as we stop using pesticides, as we plant native plants, as we rethink our lawn, we create these connections. And our town and our property owners have created a pesticide-free, healthy yard and public space for pollinators. If it's healthy for pollinators, it's healthy for pets, and it's healthy for our families. So people ask, well, if you're doing pathways and corridors, how how far can a pollinator fly? Well, it depends. It depends on the type of pollinator. You can come down to these little tiny sweat bees that are just little like green guys. They can go in a circular diameter of like 500 feet. And then as the pollinators get bigger, of course, we've got our famous monarchs that, you know, can migrate 150 miles, and generations of them head to Mexico and back. So you can go from your little backyard to on your street, to the neighborhood, to the Pequannock River Trail, all the way up into Monroe. And you know, these monarchs and some of these guys are going to be able to move that far. So let's make their pathway clean and healthy. Let's not blow, you know, plant native plants and then use pesticides, because that's an ecological trap. You don't want them to come to your backyard and then have your lawn service spray and then put that yellow sign up front, because you're going to kill them. And that's an ecological trap, and it's just not right. So we have to take 3 very simple steps to make these pathways clean. So why we create pathways here in the Northeast, and in this, these photographs you see from the air, these are our neighborhoods. It's fragmented. There's smaller property ownership, and there's a culture of lawn. We see it everywhere. I'm not going to point fingers, but this is what a lot of people aspire to as, you know, a symbol of their wealth. And when actually the lawns provide nothing other than a frame. The lawn should be a frame, not the whole landscape. And then when you saturate it with pesticides, it becomes a toxic landscape. So here again, these are our backyards. Here's Twin Brooks. Here's the Pequannock River Trail. Here's our neighborhoods. We need to help to create a pathway across, a corridor across. And how we do that, we make our yard stepping stones. We can reconnect the landscape by making our properties stepping stones to allow for a free flow of species across a healthy native landscape. This house from the air is, you can see, would be a stepping stone. They have native plants, native grasses, native shrubs, native trees, and they back up to what looks like was an old tree farm, whereas this property is all lawn. So if I was flying over this landscape as a pollinator, as a bird, looking for food, looking for nectar, looking for pollen, looking for berries, these guys offer me nothing. This house is a stepping stone. This is a healthy place for wildlife to stop off as they move across the landscape. So here's the messaging that is so simple. We're encouraging people on the pollinator pathway to do 3 things. Rethink your lawn. That could be reduce the size of your lawn, mow less, mow higher, use organic land care practices, plant clover. Don't kill the clover in your lawn. Going for walks through the neighborhood recently, I have seen so many lawns just filled with tiny little violets, purple violets, white violets. Those are very important early flowering plants for the pollinators that are just coming out of the ground now. And it's beautiful. It's so much prettier than plain lawn. It makes the lawns look like jewel boxes because they're just colored with tiny little plants that just bloom once and then they are green for the rest of the year. So, you know, don't use herbicides on your lawn. Let the clover come up, let the violets come up. And then plant native plants. The native plants bring the pollinators and the birds and increase the biological diversity of your yard. And it's very easy to learn how to find native plants. So mostly if you go to Home Depot or a big store, you're going to see annuals and other plants that are cultivated plants. And so if you buy something that has, let's say it's a coneflower, and if it just has the Latin name of the coneflower, you know that just the Latin name means it's a native plant. If it says something like starburst or, you know, red lipstick or has a little funny name in quotes, that means it's a cultivated plant. And it may not attract the pollinators the same way that the the true natives attract. So we're in a time now where we're trying to increase the market for native plants. It is working. And another slide, I'll show you what we're trying to do to make that change. But we are so lucky to have a local nursery at what we used to call Wakeman. Now it's White Birch. David Benjamin understands native plants. He understands organics. So we've got somebody right here that I would encourage people to go talk to, because he knows the difference between the native plants and why they're so important. And avoid pesticides. I would much rather see this on people's mailboxes and lawns than those yellow pesticide stickers. I think people need to just be more aware of what they're asking their landscaper to do, or what they're allowing their landscaper to do. Saturating the lawns right now with pesticides is crazy, because there's just nobody's infested with bugs yet. And most of the lawns, if a lawn is healthy and you're using organic land care, you're not going to have the weak lawns that attract the insects. So a world without insects is a world without people. These are the three things that you can check off the boxes that you're going to do in order to get on the pollinator pathway. So I'll just go through each one with a single slide. This is Rethink Your Lawn. So earlier, Vicky had a fabulous picture of the Amalfi Coast in Italy. And this is my version of that. This is at the Vatican. This is outside the Sistine Chapel. The entire lawn at the Vatican is clover. It's all clover. There's no grass in there. It's all clover. And it was incredibly beautiful, green. They don't have to water it. When it blooms, it provides pollen nectar for the pollinators, and it's really pretty. So everyone was taking pictures of the Sistine Chapel. I was taking pictures of the lawn. But it was remarkable to me how easy it was. And if it's good enough for the Pope, I guess it's good enough for us to plant clover. And this is a friend of mine that lives out in Old Lyme. And I went to visit her, and her lawn had these clover islands. There's one there, there's one there, there's one there. So she's mowed her lawn, which is organic, by the way. But she's leaving these islands of clover to bloom. And they were just buzzing with activity. Now, some purists will say to me, Mel, do you know that clover is not native? However, it is definitely much more beneficial to our insects than over here. So it does attract bees, and it does attract butterflies, and it's a great thing to have in your lawn. It also pulls nitrogen from the air and brings the nitrogen into the soil. So if you have clover in your lawn, you don't need to use high nitrogen fertilizers, because naturally the clover is pulling the nitrogen into the soil. It's called nitrogen fixing. And lawn grass seed used to have clover in it. It was always mixed in there for that reason. But then the lawn care companies, Scott's, realized that, hey, if I can have people do a Scott's 4-in-1, kill the clover off with a product, plant grass seed without clover, and then have them put nitrogen back in, we'll make more money. So let's not let them make more money. Let's have a healthier lawn and let Mother Nature take care of putting the nitrogen back in the lawn. Or be creative. You have different kinds of low growing grasses or sedges that really look beautiful in the landscape. And it just changes kind of the look. And it's certainly very much more interesting to walk on a path like that than in a plain lawn. So number 2, plant native plants. They attract wildlife. They build biodiversity. We have many demonstration sites here in Trumbull. The metamorphosis that Dimitri's working on in Twin Brooks is a native meadow. We also have a native riparian or riverside buffer at Old Mine Park. So those are our demonstration sites. And what we're trying to do is get people to see that above ground, the non-natives that we plant are lawn, some daylilies, some spirea. They don't have big root systems. Daylilies don't really attract pollinators. And spirea, I have spirea that does attract pollinators, but the root systems are not long. Look at the root systems on native plants. Black-eyed Susan, common ninebark, buffalo grass. Look at those root systems. They are going to hold the soil. And in our times of heavy rain dumps that we're getting, the storms that we're getting, where, you know, we can get anywhere from 4 to 6 to 8 inches of rain in a short period of time. These are the plants that you want because they are the sponges. They will absorb the water. So this is why when I see new developments like in Trumbull up at Long Hill Green, where that new shopping center's going in, they have planned into the new development all native plants, native shrubs, native trees, and native flowers. It is a beautiful demonstration site for a commercial property, and they're really smart because those native plants that they're putting in are going to absorb the water that runs off that parking lot. So it's a brilliant thing to do, not only for everybody that's living up here, the bees and the butterflies, but for everything down here and trying to capture this water and hold the soil. So the planting native plants, you can do it in any scale that you want. You can put pots or container gardens out front. If you live in a condo or some of these new apartments that are going up now, if you just have a porch, you can put pots of pollinator plants on the porches. For the town, we can have pollinator gardens at town hall or in library. And, you know, I'm so thankful that we have a park superintendent who really does understand these plants and how to bring more native plants into our parks because, you know, we already have the groundwork for these pollinator habitats throughout our town properties. And then we don't have a land trust. We used to have a land trust, but you know, we luckily have big restoration sites here in Trumbull that are being worked on, planting meadows instead of lawns. So as the scale goes up from pots to large meadows, the planning, the complexity and the costs also go up. But this is really the only cost for Pollinator Pathway, and you can do fundraisers to get plants, and then you can begin to collect your own seeds and then propagate your own plants going forward. And avoid pesticides and herbicides. This goes without saying. You know, why would you want your child to be walking through a lawn that is saturated with pesticides and herbicides? And, you know, we tend to be very trusting as Americans that our USDA and our FDA are taking care of testing the way they should. And as someone who spent 20 years in the biopharmaceutical industry, I know for a fact that for the drugs, the prescription drugs and the vaccines, that kind of testing does occur, but for pesticides, it does not. So we have a tendency to approve things and have them put out into the landscape. And it's not until years later that we find out that they're really having a negative impact and we have to pull them off the market. I think one of the coolest things that's happening is places like Costco have taken Roundup off the shelves. You cannot buy Roundup at Costco. And that is because, you know, there's a lot of question lately about the long-term impact of using Roundup on people who have developed cancer. And we don't have 20 years to wait for the studies. Let's err on the side of caution and use organics. And, you know, our pets, the dogs and cat paws absorb everything they walk on. And I'm sure many of you out there, and I have lost pets to lymphoma, even though I've always had an organic garden, my neighbors don't. So when I walk my dog, this stuff is running into the streets and, you know, who knows, that kind of exposure definitely has an impact on the lymphoma levels in our poor pets. So don't expose people to, you know, your pets and people to these pesticides. It is not necessary. We don't have droves of raging locusts that are eating everything in our properties. At a backyard scale, it's really not necessary. And really, to understand pollinators and how important they are, we're considering them to be almost like the starter drug for biodiversity. Biological diversity is where the term biodiversity comes from. Having a lot of different species of insects in your backyard, and birds and mammals, that's biodiversity. And to get people to learn that, you have to start small, and pollinators is the place to start. It seemed to be a trigger that people understood, and that, as I said before, if your yard's safe enough for pollinators, it's safe enough for all insects, for birds, for mammals, for pets, and your families. You know, the toxic landscapes that we see now have only been out there for maybe the last 50, 75 years. And using the products that we have used and the landscape practices that we have used in the last half century have really done a number on these insects. We can turn this around one backyard at a time. There's no question in my mind that we can turn this around. And here again, to reiterate, here's your boring lawn. And what do you see there? Oh, squirrels. You know, the deer will come through, but even the deer don't like the lawn. There's a lot less species diversity when you have plain lawn. So we're trying to get people to, one step at a time, add some more trees, add some more shrubs. The more that you add native plants, the more diversity you will see. When you get to a landscape like this, which is healthy and native plants and no pesticides, you're going to see all kinds of fabulous things that need to be in your backyard, that should be in your backyard. More biological diversity is more life. And for some of the problems that we have lately with Lyme disease and ticks, the tick populations go down when you have more diversity, because more of these guys are eating those ticks. You want possums in your backyard. You want to see them. If you don't see possums, you know, you're not going to have the best tick vacuum that you could ever have, because they will just hoover through the leaves looking for ticks, and they will suck the ticks off their own body. Possums are good, and everything else that's in the system helps to balance out. Over here, you know, you're not going to have as many of those balanced species that are going to eat the ticks and eat the mosquitoes. We need to get back to this, and we can do it. Now, what I'm concerned about lately is what I've seen is that, you know, as a mature community and mature neighborhoods, we have a lot of beautiful mature trees in our neighborhoods. And what's disturbing me lately is I'm seeing a lot of, you know, I'm welcoming new people to come into Trumbull. Hey, I came from New York 30 years ago, and I welcome everybody to come into Trumbull. But when you come here, you have to cherish what we have and the health that we have. And instead, what I'm seeing is this decline, that people are coming in and they're literally clear cutting their properties of trees, front to back and side to side. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this just in my own neighborhood. I don't understand it, because you're really going in reverse. And, you know, for them, lawns are important. And it's a very antiquated way to look at the value of your lawn. So I don't understand it. If anybody has any good sociological reasons why this is happening, let me know, because as a New Yorker, I just don't get it either, why this is more attractive than this. But we can work together to try and not wag our fingers, but give people an opportunity to enjoy the property for a year before they make landscape decisions. So here again, this is our fabulous friend, Doug Tallamy. If no one has ever read Doug Tallamy, I encourage you to he's got 3 books out, and they will tell the story of bringing nature to your backyard. And it all starts here with the native plants. They are the source for all energy that supports life. The insects need the native plants, and everything else that feeds on the insects, or spiders or reptiles, amphibians, they need the insects. If you don't have the native plants, you don't get the insects. This population crashes, this population crashes, this population crashes. This is our food chain, our web of life. It all starts here. So this is what we're encouraging people to do. Plant, don't use pesticides, and use more plants than lawn. And this is actually my my office. This is where I see the fox run every day in front of my house. But these are oak leaves that fell off of my oak tree in the fall, and they looked like Swiss cheese. And if you read Doug Tallamy, you'll understand why they look like Swiss cheese, because all year the caterpillars, oak trees support over 500 species of pollinators, of moths and caterpillars from butterflies. They are a larval host, so the larvae is the caterpillar. Caterpillars have been eating the oak leaves all year. And this shows a healthy ecosystem because those caterpillars became bird food. And these leaves did their job last year. If you see leaves without holes in them, that means somebody's spraying. It means you don't have a balanced ecosystem. So yeah, plant those oak trees, get them in your backyard, and you want the leaves to look like this at the end of the year. So starting the pollinator pathway in Trumbull, there are 6 steps that I'm just going to go through briefly, because this is what our pollinator team is going to begin to look at. Here is our Trumbull pollinator team. It is made up of, and can be made up of, more local nurseries like White Birch. We have the Trumbull Nature Center. We have a conservation commission. We have land use advisory boards. We have local organizations like the NIA and the Nichols Garden Club. We have the Long Hill Garden Club. We have lots of master gardeners in town. We have Pequannock River Watershed team. We have these are our town land use boards, and we've got our agri-science center. And there's more opportunities to get people on this team. And these are the folks that get together and begin to look at the map of our town. So this is Trumbull. This is kind of like our pathway. This is our green corridor. There's the Pequannock River goes through here. All of our parks are in here. And the neighborhoods that are in here are the ones that we're trying to encourage people to be on this corridor. But what's interesting, this was from 2017 when we were beginning to draw out the pathways in Wilton and Norwalk. What we found recently is that most towns have decided the whole town's on the pollinator pathway, not just this greenway. So everybody here, I live over here, everybody should begin to change their landscape practices, because pollinators are everywhere. And when pollinators are everywhere, there are caterpillars everywhere, and the birds will show up. So I would suggest that we as a town kind of celebrate our greenway that goes through the middle of town, protect land in there when land comes up for sale, or rather than going to a development, make it open space. Connect our emerald necklace that goes through Trumbull. But the rest of the town, our backyards, can all be on the pollinator pathway. Hold a kickoff event. So we haven't decided here in Trumbull, and hey, if you guys on the call today want to get on our team, just jump right on and come up with some ideas. We need a kickoff event. This one is a lecture. We can't do programs like this right now. This is what we tried to do last February. But here is a nursery. We had this was in Darien. They had a nursery like our nursery, and they had wine and cheese. We had young people dress up as bees. We showed a really brief presentation, and people got to walk around and see the native plants and see the organic products. And this is the kind of stuff that we luckily do have at our local nursery. So we're kind of leaning towards doing this. Tentative date we have is like maybe June 5th, which would be a nice time. So stay tuned, because we're definitely going to have our Trumbull kickoff event. And then number 4, engaging community members, garden clubs, scouts. We have a lot of corporations in town that have sustainability departments. Those people like to do local outreach, and helping us to plant natives or set up a plant sale is a great thing to have our corporate partners and town stakeholders help with. Planting, selling, and helping to design these native plants. And engaging your community. This is an organization in New Jersey called the Northeast Earth Coalition. They have planted their town center with these incredible native plants with an interpretive signage. And we're lucky because we have people in town that know how to do this, like Don Watson. He does interpretive signage. So we could have something like this around in one, I was going to say Trumbull Center, or one of our town centers, and set up tables like at our farmers market. And I love the pictures now that cracks me up, as you know, these are COVID pictures because everybody's got their mask on, everybody's holding their Pollinator Pathway sign. So let's engage the community in Trumbull, something positive. Number 5, spread the word. This was our last year program, February 2020, before COVID. The Trumbull Times had a really great article on the Pollinator Pathway last year. A lot of towns develop brochures, which we can help you with. The Pollinator Pathway website has blueprints so that we can make up our own brochures. Connecticut Magazine, there's a lot of ways. I know we have all kinds of blogs, inside Trumbull, outside Trumbull, Trumbull moms, Trumbull dads. That's how you spread the word about the Pollinator Pathway. And number 6, stay connected. There's an incredible website that we've worked on for the last 7 years. It's pollinator-pathway.org. You go to this website, and we actually have Pam Roman, who's on the Conservation Commission and Sustainable Trumbull. So she's developed our page for Trumbull, and we're just putting it onto the Pollinator Pathway website like this week. The events for our town will be listed. You order yard signs through there, and there you have printouts, PDFs, handouts, best practices for removing invasives, alternatives to pesticides, how to re-landscape to decrease ticks in your backyard. All that stuff is on the Pollinator Pathway website. And these are some of the, this is the logo that we're going to see a lot. Actually, David Benjamin is making a 5-foot wide, diameter sign of this butterfly to hang on his barn at the nursery. So people will see that and say, he's got Pollinator Pathway plants there. There's downloadable tools, logos, brochures, everything is on the website. We have lists on the website of our native wildflowers blooming through the season from May to October. Let me go back here. This was developed by our queen bee, again, Dr. Kim Stoner at the Agriculture Experiment Station. So these are our best native plants. And actually for plant sales, I'm just finishing up a plant sale that I organized for the Aspetuck Land Trust, who I work for. And we are selling, there's 10 of the 12 plants on this list. And we can sell them here in Trumbull too. This is what the sign looks like. We have a small sign that the goal was to have it go on the mailbox post. And certainly, you know, so the cost of them is $5. We as a team could sell them for $10 if we need to raise money to buy plants. And these look great on your mailbox. And we have a new one. This is Pam Roman's backyard right now. Seriously, right now. It is so beautiful. This is the smaller sign, and we have new signs that are much bigger that have just come out. So Pam has both of these, and she just took this picture yesterday in her backyard. So if we have bigger gardens here, that's what this big one is for. If you want to just put on the mailbox post, then the smaller one is fine. But it's just a great visual to get people to understand that this garden is pesticide free and it's native plants. So beautiful. And here's the bigger signs that we just made that we're going to put at some of the larger sites. And again, this is what a page looks like. So this is Phillipstown, New York. This is their Pollinator Pathway page. So it lists who the team members are. So they're Hudson Highlands Land Trust, Cornell Cooperative Extension, and we would have our team members listed here. And telling people to join the pathway. And so you'd go on the website and then pull down the page and you'd see Trumbull. Click on Trumbull and then we have our own page. So we don't have to make our own website. And this is a shared and evolving idea. The Pollinator Pathway is organized by mainly people who are already doing this work and who understand it. And it helps to recognize that when engaging new organizations, that people that, maybe our garden clubs, we've got people in our garden clubs who understand this, and we have to use them to help teach everybody else to do this. And the ideas are taken, the Gospel According to Doug Tallamy. This is his first book. It will change your life. And there are other local organizations like the Xerces Society, which is based in New Haven, that provide a lot of support. So for us to organize here in Trumbull, we need to listen to people and move everybody towards taking the action. Our schools, our high schools, our organizations, encouraging people to show up for what matters in your community. And landowner outreach through grassroots organizing is the way to go. It's an invitation to show up. We're not forcing people to change. You don't have to change, but I'd rather get people be a little bit embarrassed that they had these signs on their lawn. How is it that this is okay? I'd rather see this on the lawns, and I'm sure most of you would, but we want people to be a change. Be the change that you want to see in the world. Do it in your backyard. Plant your natives, reduce your lawn. Look for a nursery that gets native and pesticide-free plants. Ask your land care professional what they're doing and what they're putting on your lawn, and say, hey, I don't want these toxic things. I want to go organic. Ask your neighbor to accept, and I don't necessarily think it has to be a messier yard, but right now, like if all the spring cleanups that are going on, blowing the leaves and the insects to oblivion right now is not a good thing. Leave the leaves on there for a while. Let the young insects come out. And, people complain that they don't see fireflies anymore. You don't see fireflies or lightning bugs because all your leaves are gone. Leave your leaves there. They need the leaves. Ask your town or city to use native plants and no pesticides in landscaping. Vote for representatives who support issues around pollinator health, and lobby at the state level. Luckily, we live in a state in Connecticut that is one of the few states that has a pollinator protection law. I encourage you to look it up. It does two things. It encourages our Department of Transportation to plant native plants and grasses along our roadways. Our DOT is the largest landowner in the state, and they are transforming their landscapes. And the other thing is that neonicotinoids, which are nicotine-based pesticides, are restricted in the state of Connecticut. So we can't buy them off the shelf. However, licensed pesticide applicators can use them. They are neurotoxins, and it is doing a number on all of our bees. We're trying now to get them banned at other states and at the federal level. So neonicotinoids are bad. In Connecticut, we have a law now to restrict them. Our Pollinator Pathway offers a platform for connecting, showing the assets of our town in Trumbull and all of our people that are involved across town lines. Work with Monroe, they want to do it too. Bridgeport has some great areas. Easton, let's connect the Pollinator Pathways to Shelton and begin to just get to know the people in the towns next to us, because we're all on the same page. And what a lot of folks, this is a team that together we're working on collecting wild seeds and propagating native plants. And this is called the Ecotype Project. I don't have too much time to go into that, but basically it's wild collected seeds. They grow the crops out. This is Joe Pye weed. Here's New York ironweed. This is grown out at an organic farm in Ridgefield. Collect the seeds, bring them to a grower. In Newtown, we have Planter's Choice who's growing these, and then we sell them at plant sales. This is how you get the native plants into the landscape for the bees. Actually, last year we sold 11,000 of these Ecotype plants. This year I just finished a sale where I sold 14,000 plugs that are going to go in. So every year it's increasing. The new tools for this year, there's a pesticide brochure that is just finishing up. This is a great tool to have in the town to encourage people to go organic. And then there's something called a story map, which is on the website. It's kind of like a slide presentation, but it's a really interactive way to learn more about the pollinator pathway. And again, these are the points I used before. Why is this working? Because of the pollinator butterflies. They're charismatic. It's positive. We're keeping it simple and affordable or even free. It's the town local control, and it's an excuse to talk about something positive. So just as I finish up, the secret of change is to focus all your energy, not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And every one of these photographs was taken in the backyard of a friend of mine in Westchester County who has a really small urban backyard. And these photographs are what shows up when you get on the pollinator pathway and when you start to plant natives. And I found this definition for courage. Again, I have found this before COVID. It's even more important now. The world looks to leaders to model courage. So when your passion overtakes your fear, courage emerges. Courage is acting in the face of fear, standing up for the truth, being willing to take a risk, and actively making a difference. And this is exactly what the pollinator pathway stands for. So that's all I have for you today. This is my email address. Email me anytime. I encourage you to go to pollinatorpathway.org. I love this little sleeping bee in the flower, and that's just kind of cute. And I'd love to open up for questions if we have any time. And
we have a couple of questions, but to preempt some that may come up, for those who were wondering, you'll be getting a copy of this recording as a follow-up to joining us today. So thank you again. You can go to our website, which is on the town website, and all of our assets for the pollinator pathway are under our land stewardship bullet. So look for that. It's going to be a living document. We're going to be adding things to it all the time. So please keep an eye out and do follow us on social media. We have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Nextdoor. So there are two questions right now, Mary Ellen. The first question is, on the topic of cutting trees, do you have recommendations on what a homeowner should do for old, decaying trees? My yard has an old sugar maple with lots of dead wood. I don't want branches to fall on the road or my house. If I take it down, should I leave a part of it up for animals to live in? And what can I plant in its place if I need to remove it entirely?
Oh, that's a great question. So if the tree is near your house, that's a problem, and would not hesitate to take down trees that are dangerous. If it is not near your house, if it's at the edge of the woods and if it won't fall on anything, I would leave it. That's called a snag, S-N-A-G, and leaving snags is a great thing for birds and for insects. You can have somebody take the branches off and leave, a really high trunk, and it'll just begin to decay. I've actually seen some folks do that recently. Trees close to their house that they don't want to take down, they just leave, they take some of the larger branches off. But it's a great thing. If you can leave it, if it falls, just leave it there. We don't have to be super clean. The dead wood is so important to have woody debris. The branches are important. Everything you can leave is a great thing to do. And you can plant in its place. I have a list of the top, what we like to call keystone trees. Sugar maples in there, oaks are number one. But we'll get that list out to everybody so they can look at the top, 12 fabulous trees for nature that you can put into your backyard. So there's a lot of options. If it's not near your house, you can leave it up. I would encourage that.
I've noticed a lot of people asking questions about tick spraying. This seems to be the time of year when we're seeing a lot of ticks. And is there a safe way to spray for ticks, Mary Ellen, or is it something that should be avoided entirely?
Well, there's an awful lot of research being done on tick sprays right now. And the CDC actually has done some years of research and found that, strangely enough, Using most of the tick sprays, like the pyrethrin-based ones, may reduce the number of ticks. It has zero impact on the incidence of Lyme disease, which is mind-blowing now. However, there are repellents that are out there that are still being researched. Some of them are mint or wintergreen or cedar oil repellents that you can spray. I wouldn't even bother spraying in your lawn because ticks hate the sun. They hate the heat. They're not going to be in a hot meadow. They're going to be in the edge. They like moist and shade. They're in the fringe between the trees and your lawn. That is where most, if you're going to use a repellent, that's where most of the tick spraying goes on, in that perimeter area. And so those are being researched. They're not as toxic as the pyrethrins. And really the first thing to do is, like, if you're going out and you're going to be walking in the woods, put the repellent on yourself. You know, check yourself when you come in. That's the best way to do it. There's no reason to kind of just blast your property, because if it's going to affect ticks, it most likely will affect spiders too, and it will affect a lot of the arachnids. So it's kind of overkill. I've never sprayed my property for ticks. I've got a huge meadow that I run in with shorts, and I never get ticks because they hate the sun and they're not out there. But if I go in the woods, I bundle up. And that's the best recommendation that I had for you.
Great. Well, we don't have any other questions, so we're going to go to our incentive prize drawing. And today we have, I'm going to share my screen to show you. Can you see that? We have a pollinator protector kit. It's aimed at children, so we're going to get them in early to show them, you know, and give them the gospel of pollinator protection. So thank you for the folks who signed up and who attended today's great presentation. Mary Ellen, as usual, you were fantastic. And don't forget to sign up for tomorrow, our last event. We have a nationally known artist who's going to talk about drawing and illustrating nature. So for today, the winner of the Pollinator Protector Kit is Gloria. So Gloria will email you and come up with a way to get you the kit in person. So thanks everyone so much. I've really enjoyed this myself. I think it's a great presentation. And as someone who gave up spraying pesticides 2 years ago and pulling invasives on my property, I can tell you it's very rewarding. So thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for getting on. Happy Earth Day.
Thank you.
Thank you.